Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into a question today that I know a lot of people have wondered about.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Do kids actually learn languages better than adults?
Or is that just something people say?
Right.
Just one of those things you hear.
I think a lot of people think that.
Like,
Yeah.
kids are just these like little sponges soaking it all up.
It makes sense.
Right, but we're going to look at the research and see, what the science actually says.
Yeah, we're going to break it all down.
See if there's any truth to that.
Exactly. And is there a clear winner?
Yeah, right? Is it like adults versus kids who takes the trophy, or is it more complicated than that?
Yeah, it's definitely more complicated than that.
Okay. All right. So before we get into it, though, I do want to mention something that might be helpful for anyone listening out there
Oh, yeah. What's that?
who's interested in learning a language, which I'm guessing is most of you.
Probably.
It's called Lang Magic.
Lang Magic, yeah.
Have you heard of it?
I have heard of it. Yeah. So it's a really cool platform, and we'll talk about it a bit more later. But
Definitely.
it's got tons of, authentic content.
That's the best way to learn.
Right. So things like music and movies and podcasts and all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes language learning,
More fun.
way more fun, way more engaging than, those old boring textbooks.
Yeah, exactly. Like, who wants to just sit there with like a grammar book?
No one wants to do that.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll talk about Lang Magic more later. But for now, let's get into this whole, you know, kids versus adults thing.
Let's do it.
Okay, so one thing I always hear is that kids learn languages so effortlessly.
Yeah, you always hear that.
Like they just pick it up without even trying.
Seems like magic.
Right. And adults are over here struggling with verb conjugations and,
Right.
mispronouncing everything.
Yeah.
Is there any truth to that?
Well, there is some research to support the idea that kids who are immersed in a language
Correct.
can achieve that like native-like fluency that so many adults want, but it's not always a guaranteed win for them.
Interesting.
There was some research by Abramson and Hiltonstam back in 2008.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they found that it's not as straightforward as we might think.
Okay, so maybe it's not just a slam dunk for the kids.
Not necessarily.
All right. What about the speed of learning, though? Don't kids have some sort of advantage there?
So that's interesting because it really depends on what you mean by faster.
Okay.
There's research by Lichtman in 2016. They actually found that adults learn faster in a structured setting, like a classroom.
Hmm.
They can pick up grammar rules and vocabulary much quicker.
Oh, so like in a formal learning environment.
Exactly.
Adults might actually have the edge.
Yeah, they tend to be more efficient in that kind of setting.
So why is that? Is it because our, adult brains are just like super powered language learning machines or something?
Well, not quite a superpower, but adults have a lot of cognitive skills that help with language learning.
Like what kind of skills?
Well, we're better at analyzing information.
Nope.
We can memorize patterns more easily.
Right.
And we're good at applying rules.
So it's like we're more strategic about it.
Exactly. And that's really helpful when you're learning a new language.
Yeah.
It's like having a blueprint for building a sentence.
Yeah.
You can see the structure, you can understand the rules,
Yeah.
and you can start putting the pieces together more quickly.
So if I'm signing up for like a French class or something, my adult brain might actually give me a head start.
Yes,
Mm.
especially in those early stages
Oh, okay.
when you're learning the basics of grammar and vocabulary.
So I might be like ahead of the curve at first.
You might be, yeah.
Okay, but what about long-term fluency?
Right.
Like really sounding like a native speaker?
That's where things get interesting.
Okay.
Because when we look at that long-term fluency and achieving that like native-like quality, children often have the edge,
Really?
especially if they're immersed in the language.
So even though adults might be faster learners at first, in the long run, kids might actually end up being more fluent.
It's possible, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so this is already more complicated than I thought.
I know, right? It's not as simple as we assume.
Not at all. So tell me more about this difference in brain development.
Okay, so it has a lot to do with how our brains develop over time.
Right, like we've all heard that, kids' brains are more flexible,
Exactly.
more plastic.
Yeah, that's the term they use.
So is that true?
It is true.
Okay.
Children's brains are more adaptable.
Okay.
They're wired for learning new things.
Right.
And that includes languages.
So does that mean that my adult brain is like stuck in its ways?
Well, not exactly.
Okay, good.
It just means we might have to work a little harder
Okay.
to rewire our brains for new sounds and grammar patterns.
So I'm not doomed to sound like a tourist forever.
No, not at all.
Okay, phew.
There's been more recent research
Oh, good.
that's shown adult brains are still capable of change and adaptation.
So we can still learn?
Absolutely, we can
Back.
still learn.
It just takes more effort.
It might take more effort and more focused practice. Think
Okay.
about musicians.
Okay.
Those who start young often have an advantage.
Right.
But plenty of adults become incredible musicians too.
That's true.
It's not about being stuck, it's about finding the right approach and putting in the work.
Okay. So there's hope for us old folks yet.
There's always hope.
All right. I like it.
You can still achieve a high level of proficiency,
Okay, good. Good.
especially with the right strategies.
And maybe a little more patience than a 5-year-old.
Maybe a little more patience, yeah.
All right. So we've got adults who are faster learners in a structured setting, but kids who might have an edge when it comes to long-term fluency.
That's right.
Now, I'm curious how these differences play out when we look at specific aspects of language, like pronunciation or grammar.
That's a great question.
Should we dive into that a bit more?
Let's do it.
Okay, awesome.
We can unpack those comparisons and see how they affect both kids and adults.
All right, sounds good to me. Let's take a quick break and then we'll jump right back into it.